These days, when I hear the term journalist, it's because someone has been beheaded in the Middle East. When I was growing up, no one that I knew of was beheading journalists. They were doing fine, vital work like Woodward and Bernstein, and among them, 3 in particular attracted at least as much attention as the things they wrote about: Norman Mailer, Hunter Thompson, and Tom Wolff. Mailer was the most conventional of the 3, but he had his quirks. The most obvious was his vanity, which could be overweening, to put it mildly, he being the author of a volume entitled Advertisements for Myself. Mailer couldn't get enough of himself. In his imagination he created a Rushmore with his visage on it, prominent and alone, and from that perspective he made his reports. He styled himself as a tough guy, a pugilist, in the manner of Hemingway. I believe he once ran for mayor of New York. He was a witness to the major events of the time, interposing a voice he called Aquarius, a device that grew so maddening that even he dropped it. His best work was probably The Executioner's Song, for the simple reason that there is less of him in it. Even there, I wasn't wild about it, but then I wasn't all that crazy about In Cold Blood either. Thompson became known for gonzo journalism, which was really no journalism at all, more of an all-out guerrilla attack against the establishment. If he was covering a big sporting event or a political race, you could be certain that there would be no or very little mention of it in his work. He'd be on the periphery with his artist pal Ralph Steadman or his lawyer friend, high as they could get on drugs and booze, deploring everything around them. It was so contrary that it could be exhilarating, even if you would forget exactly what it was that you were getting all excited about. He was counter not just to the culture, but the counterculture too. The way he saw it, the 7 deadlies had pretty much been elevated into virtues. Against this, he was a scourge. His famous catchphrase was fear and loathing, and he trained those 2 scathing biblical shotgun barrels at everything he covered, along with the drugs and booze, which were necessary because what he was sent to report on, most especially Richard Nixon, was so despicable, hypocritical, corrupt, fraudulent, and fundamentally unworthy that he couldn't get through the task without them. His audience, of course, was in complete and fairly rabid agreement with that. He styled himself as a certain character, Dr. Thompson, the very essence of gonzo. I think there was a cigarette holder, sunglasses, and a rakish hat, or maybe that was just Doonesbury's take on him. He was the consummate outcast outlaw, and I believe he ran for sheriff several times on the freak power ticket from where he holed up in Colorado with his cache of guns, and he vented his considerable spleen without producing much work until he couldn't take it anymore. The world was just too fucked up for him, and he shot himself, the true blazing gonzo exit. Wolff was a southern dandy wrapped up in an all-white suit, whose prose read like a stunt pilot doing flips, loops, and barrel rolls. They called it the new journalism, and it was Wolff's contention that if his research was intense and thorough, what we would now call embedded, he could penetrate into his subjects' minds and write from their perspective. He could synthesize and project their innermost thoughts and feelings, stream of consciousness, interior monologues. That was his fair game. He was a great scene setter and dramatizer. He used the present tense to gain immediacy. He understood group dynamics better than the groups did. He paddled around the culture as a social anthropologist, finding all sorts of characters, players, schemers, posers, dropouts, and champions in the test pilots and our race car drivers. He loved italics, dashes, and exclamation marks, and run-on sentences that reeked of unchecked exuberance. He specialized in sartorial analysis and the meaning of things, accessories in the high-stakes, never-ending game of status. His style was antic, baroque, rococo, and psychedelic. Eventually, the trademark style became his substance. I thought of it as tomfoolery, sending up this and that, balloons, kazoos, and fireworks. I don't think he ever ran for any office. He graduated from lengthy, power-packed short reports to longer, dazzling flights, and he had his way of making whatever he was writing about seem alive and important and true. You'd be missing out if you didn't catch what he was saying. The zeitgeist was always on the tip of his tongue or pen. He was the pulse of his times. Since he was using fiction techniques in his reporting anyway, it was natural for him to turn to fiction to say what he wanted to say, while using the same snappy style. It was no stretch for him to do that, and his popularity continued, but I did not follow him there.